Good morning, friend. Welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Becky if you're new, and today we are doing a week's worth of meal prep in one morning. I have a busy week this week. I want to eat really well. I want my family to eat really well, but I don't have time the rest of the week to really deal with making dinner. And about a month and a half ago, I did this where I took about an hour to meal prep, not cook everything, but get everything ready to go. So on the day that we wanted dinner, I just had to either put it in the oven, turn the stove on, throw it in the grill, turn the crock pot on, or turn the Instant Pot on. And so that's what we're gonna be doing today. So we're gonna prep 3 dinners. The first dinner we're gonna prep is barbecue beef sliders. So I have about a 3-pound chuck roast in there. I'm gonna get this going on high because I'm getting a little bit later start than I wanted. So we still need to make the homemade barbecue sauce to go on the top of this, which I'm gonna make right now. We're also gonna make homemade brioche buns to go along with tonight's dinner. So this is the meal that I'm actually gonna start and finish today. We're gonna have this for dinner tonight. And then we're gonna have a fajita night. So we're gonna do a sheet pan dinner and get fajitas prepped and ready to go for sometime this week. I'm not sure which order I'm gonna be cooking these in this week. I'm just gonna prep it all and then deciding on what my family wants to eat and what time restraints and things I'm working with. I'll decide what other meals we're gonna make. We're gonna make a Mediterranean style dinner with a marinated chicken kebab and rice and lentils on the stove, which is one of my favorites, with caramelized onions. And I don't make that very often, even though we love it. We're gonna make some veggie sides, some dipping sauces, and a dessert. So I'm gonna prep 3 dinners and a dessert today because I think that's gonna be enough to get us through the entire week for my family. So let's get the barbecue sauce made in this little bowl. For the homemade barbecue sauce, we're gonna start with some honey. My honey was crystallized, so I had to warm it up a little bit, and it came out a little faster than I was expecting, but it's gonna be delicious. And then the next thing we're gonna add is some brown sugar, ketchup, Worcestershire sauce. I'm about tripling the amount that the recipe calls for because I love this with beef so much. Pepper, smoked paprika, salt. This is my basil salt. I just thought that would add a nice little herbiness. I'm gonna add a little bit more. It's about a 3-pound chuck roast, onion powder, and garlic. So what I'm gonna do is mix this all together. And that's our homemade barbecue sauce. That garlic will dissolve and melt. That was frozen once it gets into the crock pot. Now, I'm not gonna add any broth or anything to this chuck roast. This chuck roast is thawed, but as it cooks, it's gonna release a lot of its own broth. And so when I cook in the crock pot, don't like to add a ton of extra because then I find it gets a little too liquidy in the crock pot. So I'm just gonna add this, and I'll keep an eye on it because I'm gonna be in the kitchen for a bit this morning. So if I feel like it needs some water or broth, I can add it at that point. But I'm gonna start by just putting the chuck roast in here with our sauce, and then we'll get going on our buns so that can rise while we prep some of the other dinners we're gonna be making for the week. So there's the garlic puck. That will thaw and I'll be able to kind of spread that around. For the beef, I'm gonna let that sit and cook in the crock pot until it's fall apart tender. And that's probably gonna take a good 6 to 8 hours on high. That's why I wanted to get that going first thing. So now we're gonna make our brioche buns. Now, this recipe that I'm following is one that I've been wanting to make for quite some time. I've been wanting to make brioche bread, but we're going to just take this recipe and adapt it into buns because I was looking at different brioche bun recipes, and I think we can do that no problem. So what we're gonna do is start with milk. Brioche is a very rich bread because it has lots of eggs and butter and milk. It's an enriched dough. That's what I should call it because that's what it is. So we're gonna start with our milk and our yeast. And it has quite a bit of yeast in it. Probably needs that to leaven the bread. And I'm just going to let this sit for just a minute. Now, one thing about this recipe is that it doesn't say what type of flour to use. It just says 6 cups of flour. but it doesn't say if it should be all-purpose flour or bread flour. I'm gonna go with my gut and I'm gonna use bread flour because I've been using that quite a bit lately for making bread and it's working out really well for me. And then the next thing we're gonna add is sugar. Let me double check the recipe here. Yep, sugar. I will link all these recipes down below if you want to try any of them yourself. Now this is an interesting thing about this recipe is we're only gonna add part of the flour. Now we're gonna knead this until it's smooth. And then we'll come back and add more ingredients after this sits for 30 minutes. At this point, I'm gonna cover it and we're gonna let this sit and rest, and then we'll add the rest of the ingredients. We have a huge part of tonight's dinner going already. We've got our main dish, or our main protein. We've got our buns going. Now what I wanna get going on is the rice and lentils because we need to caramelize a ton of onions, and this is gonna take a good half an hour. So we've got a half an hour wait on that, a half an hour on that, many hours on that. So we're just gonna keep moving to the next thing while we have different things going. So we're not just staring and waiting for dough to rise or waiting for the caramelized onions. We can prep other parts of this week's dinner while those things are happening. For this rice and lentils, you wanna make sure you have a pot with a lid because we're eventually gonna cook our rice and lentils in this. So what I need to do pretty quickly, now that I'm preheating that pot, is I need to get quite a few onions sliced up thinly. This is one of my favorite side dishes of all time, but I don't make it all the time because it's a little bit time consuming. So this seems to, I think, gonna work out really well because I can be doing other things while this is cooking. To actually cook the rice and the lentils, it doesn't take a lot of time, but caramelizing onions takes a lot of time. And this is what makes this dish, not only the spices, but these sweet onions that counterbalance all that really yummy toasty spiciness that you get from all the aromatics we're gonna be putting in this, just make it incredible. So it's worth the work. I just don't gravitate toward this recipe on just like a random weeknight just because of the prep that takes to go along with it. But if you want easy lunches, it works really well to reheat. And so I'm gonna make the full recipe, and then whatever we don't end up eating for dinner the night I cook this, none of it will go to waste. We'll use it as lunch meal prep. So I've got quite a few onions. I think I pulled out 5 or 6 onions. And we're gonna caramelize all these until they're incredibly sweet. Whew. These are strong onions. Probably didn't need to preheat this earlier. I put it on the lowest setting, it's still good. Now I am going to use, that's avocado oil, a nice, yummy, delicious olive oil. And we're gonna put a good amount in there. We're not looking to brown these onions, we're looking to caramelize these onions. So low and slow is the name of the game when it comes to this. This might look like a lot of onions, but it's gonna cook down to hardly anything. I only have a little bit of oil left in this one. I'm gonna go ahead and empty that. And then I wanna get some salt in here to help draw out some of the moisture, and that'll help that cook quicker. And I think, again, I'm gonna use my basil salt, but if you just have regular salt, that'll work just fine. I think we're gonna be able to prep the sheet pan fajitas in the time we're still waiting for our dough to rise. I also wanna make, the night we have fajitas, I wanna make a roasted corn salsa, because I have lots of corn in the freezer that I put up last year. And one thing I did when it came to these recipes is I tried to shop my pantry and my freezers first before running to the grocery store. So the only few things I needed to get for today's cooking projects were these 2 peppers, the fresh herbs we're gonna be using, and the onions, because I am out of all of the onions that I grew last year in last year's garden and that I bought from the local farmer. So the grocery store came in handy when it came to these fresh ingredients we need for today. But I kind of wanted to use up things I already had, so that's kind of how I came up with the menu today. So for the sheet pan fajitas, I have 1 red bell pepper here and 1 green bell pepper and an onion, and I'm gonna slice these up. I just in the last year started using sheet pan dinners as a way to make easy dinners, and I have fallen in love with it. There's something really nice about being able to throw the whole sheet pan in the oven, and sometimes I feel like when I cook on my stove, it makes a little bit more of a mess. I think I'm gonna get a compost bowl out and a bowl that we're gonna mix our fajitas in. On these onions, I did turn the heat up, but I wanna keep a close eye on it. If I notice that at any point they start to brown, I'm gonna turn that heat way, way down. Now that we have our veggies prepped, I'm gonna go ahead and prep the chicken for the fajitas. I have 2, 4, 5 chicken thighs here, and I'm just gonna go ahead and trim off some of the excess fat because I don't think it's gonna render out very well in the oven. So I'm just gonna take a second to trim that, and then I'm gonna slice these chicken thighs pretty thin. And I can get these chicken thighs right into my bowl with my veggies. And then I think while I'm prepping chicken and I have this knife and cutting board out, I'm gonna go ahead and after I get this chicken thighs in the fridge, I'm gonna pop my chicken breast out and we're gonna prep that for the Mediterranean chicken that I'm gonna either cook on the grill or in the air fryer. Probably on the grill, because it's supposed to be the nicest weather we've had all year so far this week. So I think we'll probably end up doing it on the grill. Now I have my chicken breast here and another bowl. We're going to make a yogurt marinated sauce for this. And we are going to put these on the grill, I've decided, but we're going to put them on skewers. So what I want to do with these chicken breasts is, these again are a little bit frozen, which makes this really easy. Once I have this done, we now have all the protein prepped. I mean, we still have to put the seasonings and the marinades on, but all the cutting and everything of the proteins is done. I got the counter clean and I put the chicken breast cubes in the refrigerator because we're gonna make this one up so that we can check this off the list and call our chicken fajita sheet pan, the main portion of this dinner, done. So I'm gonna grab a few spices. Or maybe a lot of spices and get those over here. I have all sorts of goodies here when it comes to spices, but first I'm gonna put a little bit of avocado oil on there. And then I have some homemade taco seasoning. And this does not have salt in it, so I will end up needing to put some salt in this. Probably put 1, 2.5 tablespoons of taco seasoning, some black pepper, chipotle powder. I love the flavor of chipotle. It's sweet, it's smoky, spicy, all the good things. It is kind of spicy, so I'm gonna put probably about 1/2 tablespoon of that. That's why I wanna make kind of a more cooling, creamy, citrusy sauce instead of a chipotle sauce, because we're gonna get that chipotle flavor in our meat. That was smoked paprika. Now we're gonna mix this together. I'm not gonna add salt until I actually cook this because salt will draw out moisture. And so I don't want to add that until I go to cook this. I think what I want to add is a little bit of freshly squeezed citrus. I squeezed a ton of fresh citrus and then I froze it. And I pulled this out of the freezer last night knowing we were going to use a lot of citrus in today's cooking. So I'm going to put probably the equivalent of about 1 lemon's worth in here. That'll add some brightness to this. I had this on high and I just turned it way down because this is browning too quickly. So now we're just going to let this cook on very low until we get some beautiful color on these onions. Now I have covered my chicken and peppers and onions. So the main for when we have sheet pan fajitas is done. We still need to make the corn salsa and the sauce to go on top, but this part is done. So I'm gonna get this in the fridge. And now we can turn our focus back to our bread. So what I need to do first, according to the recipe, is I need to scramble 6 eggs. So this bread recipe, let me find it, has 6 eggs. So if you happen to be like me and you're getting an abundance of eggs right now, this might be a good recipe to make. I also need to melt 200 grams of butter. And I'm not sure why the whole recipe is in cups and then the butter is in grams. So I'm gonna have to pull out a stick of butter because I don't know how many grams are typically in 1 stick of butter. And I need to melt that. Let's see. I should probably get some butter out anyway because I need to make the rhubarb dessert and we're gonna use quite a bit of butter for that. $200 grams is almost 2 sticks of butter. I'm gonna have to get my scale out because 1 stick says that it's 113 grams. So let's see how accurate this stick of butter is. 116 grams. So it's 3 grams more than it says, so that's good. I'm curious to see what this is gonna look like after it's sat for 30 minutes. So it's nice and bubbly. So we need to whisk our eggs. We're gonna add our eggs to our dough that we've started. Now we're gonna add our butter. That didn't fully melt, but I think that'll be okay. I think it'll melt just fine once we get it in there. Now we're gonna add the rest of our flour. Which is 4 more cups up to 5 more cups. So that's 4. I'm gonna mix this and see what it looks like, and I'll add more flour if we need to. This has been kneading for about 5 minutes, and I wanna show you how elastic and sticky it still is. It's almost like, it's not like a dough yet, it's more like a batter. My eggs for my chickens are pretty large, so I definitely think I'm gonna need the extra flour. I'm gonna start with a 1/2 cup, and I'll add another 1/2 cup or 1/4 cup if needed. And then once we get it to the consistency, we're gonna let this knead for 15 minutes. I think what I'm gonna do while that's kneading, because that's gonna take a good 15 minutes, is I'm gonna wash a few dishes by hand so that I don't put these big old bowls in the dishwasher, and I'm gonna leave room for the smaller things like this that I don't wanna wash by hand. And then we're gonna go out and harvest some rhubarb so we can make our dessert for the week. So here's the rhubarb patch. It's so big. I planted these last year and they were like 3 inches tall, if that. And now it's ginormous. Oh my goodness, look how beautiful these are. This is the one I was just looking at. So I'm gonna go down toward the ground and just pull. And I only need 5 cups. So I think 2 pieces, well, maybe 3. I'm gonna wash this really well before we eat it. I could actually probably just set it right there. I'm gonna harvest from another plant. I've got 3 plants in here. But I mean, look at how big this is. That's incredible. I think these 3 stalks are gonna be more than enough. Now, rhubarb leaves are toxic, but you can use them as mulch. If they mulch in your garden, they don't create toxicity in your garden. You just don't want to eat them. So I'm going to put these here. Next time I head out into the garden, I'll bring those out and I'll just throw those on a garden bed for mulch. You know, now I'm thinking, I mean, you can see how big these are. Maybe we need 1 more. I just got back in here and I think our dough is ready to rest for a good hour. I did end up adding about another cup. So the recipe called for 6 cups plus an additional 1 possibly. I put about 8. So I'm gonna do the stained glass test, which is where you take a piece of dough and you stretch it out and you see how thin you can get it, and you wanna make sure you can see light through it, which I can clearly see light through this. What that means is that you've developed enough gluten and you're good to go for the next step. So this is great. I'm glad I used bread flour. I mean, I guess we have to taste it to know for sure, but that's really beautiful. So this is a lot of dough. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make 1 loaf and then rolls. So we're gonna get a brioche loaf of bread as well. I'm just stretching this out a little bit so that it's more even in this mixer. And then we'll just let this rise for an hour in this mixer. And I'm gonna put the lid on so it stays nice and warm and cozy in there for it. So I just washed this really well. And we're gonna start on our dessert. I don't have to cut these perfectly because we are gonna cook these down. We're gonna make a sauce out of them. I went ahead and you saw I got the lentils on the stove to par cook. Those need to be par cooked. And so those are cooking. Lentils take longer than rice. But while that's cooking, we're gonna get going on one of the other layers of this dessert. So it's got 3 layers. There's the oatmeal layer, a cream cheese layer, and then the rhubarb layer, and then more of the oatmeal topping. So to the cream cheese, I'm going to mix this a little bit. I forgot to take the cream cheese out of the refrigerator last night. So I just popped it in the microwave for about 30 seconds so it'd be nice and soft. And to that, we are gonna add powdered sugar, an egg, and vanilla. We're gonna cream that together. That's now done, so now we can make our oatmeal layer. But before we do that, our rhubarb is soft and beautiful. And so what I wanna do now is actually put our cornstarch slurry in there to thicken that up a little bit. So that's just cornstarch and water. Cook that for a minute, and then the rhubarb layer is done. For the oat layer, We've got 1 cup of softened butter. This I also forgot to take out of the fridge last night, so I just popped it in the microwave for a little bit to soften it. Now I'm gonna add just all-purpose flour. Rolled oats, brown sugar. You can see how this is almost just like a crumble topping. That's it for that. And salt. And then I'm gonna get in here with my hands because it's just gonna be easier, and I'm gonna mix this together until we get a nice crumble mixture. So the bottom layer, we're gonna take about 2/3 of our crumble mixture and get that on the bottom. So this is gonna make like a crust, because these are bars. So I have a 9x13 baking dish here, and I did line it with parchment paper so that it's gonna be easier to get out of here so we can cut it into bars. And I'm gonna push this crumble topping in the bottom so that it does make a crust when it bakes. I do have my oven preheated to 350 degrees. If you've never had rhubarb and you want to try it, now is the time to do it. It's definitely a seasonal ingredient. I can find rhubarb in my grocery store around Mother's Day, so this is the perfect time. Traditionally, every Mother's Day I make a rhubarb pie, and I can always find it at the farmer's market at this time. So if you can't find it in your local grocery store, but you happen to have a farmer's market near you, look there for it, because I bet that that would be a good place that you would be able to find rhubarb this time of year if you want to try it and you've never tried it before. So I'm just taking this cream cheese mixture and layering it, trying to get it evenly spread so that each bite is consistent. This is actually a recipe that does really well if you make it the day before you want to serve it. I like this chilled in the refrigerator. I love cold rhubarb. These rhubarb bars are actually going to be going to Josh's mom's house because Josh's grandparents are coming into town this week, and rhubarb is one of my mother-in-law's and Josh's grandma and grandpa's favorite. And so I thought that this would be perfect to make these up on this day when I'm prepping a bunch of other things so that we can enjoy 1 or 2 of them, but most of these can be dropped off and the grandparents and my mother-in-law can enjoy them. So once you get your layers all put in there, then what I'm going to do is just take the rest of that crumble topping and I'm going to crumble that on the top. And this is basically the rhubarb cream cheese bars, and friend, these are incredible. Dessert is almost done. So now it is time to go ahead and get going on the buns for dinner tonight, plus apparently a loaf of bread, because this makes a lot. This has risen absolutely beautifully. It smells really good too. I have tile countertops, so I don't like to roll out bread on them. So I always use this really big silicone mat. I love this thing, and this is what I always work my doughs or pastry on. Is take half of this and make rolls out of half of the dough, and then the other half of the dough I'll make into a loaf of bread that I'm gonna braid. I'm gonna break that into 3 even pieces, and then this is gonna be our rolls, or our buns. I'm gonna get 9 buns out of this. I'm gonna roll them into balls, and then I'm gonna flatten them so that they're more like a bun shape. So that's our last bun. So we've got our 9 buns here. Now I'm gonna take my 3 pieces, and I need to make them into even shaped logs, and we are gonna braid the loaf. Now I have to remember how to braid. Let's see. Let's do like this. Maybe I should make them a little longer. Look at that. I'm gonna cover this and we're gonna let this rest for probably about a half an hour to 45 minutes. I just don't wanna let the dough dry out while it's rising for its final rise. We are making some serious headway here. Not only are we getting our 9 buns, but we are hopefully gonna get a beautiful loaf of brioche bread, which I was not intending, but might just be a happy accident. My dream is to turn that into French toast, even like a stuffed French toast, or maybe to put some of that lemon curd and fresh whipped cream on the French toast. Whatever it might be, that brioche bread is going to be turned into something yummy. So what I'm gonna do now is I've got some frozen corn that I put up last year in last year's garden, and my onions are done, so we can get going on the next step on that. But I do have this oven preheated so that we can kind of char this corn and make a really yummy either side or salsa to go onto our fajitas. Or we'll just eat it with chips. I don't know. I don't even know if I actually have chips in the house right now. So I'm going to open these and then I'm going to just kind of let some of the extra moisture just drip off into the sink because these were frozen and I want them to get a nice caramely color in the oven. You don't have to do this step. You could skip this step and just make a corn salsa without charring it. But I thought it would be yummy to get some sort of kind of caramelization color on this. I'm just gonna lay this out just a little bit. And then I'm going to take my avocado spray and just spray the top with some oil to help it caramelize in the oven. My onions are beautifully caramelized, so what I want to do is actually remove almost all of these onions out of here. So we're going to prep this dish basically until it's ready to cook the rice and the lentils fully through, but we've got a few more steps before we can do that. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and take all the onions out so we can toast up our rice, because we want to put a little bit of color on our rice, and we can just do that right in this pan with some of this little bit of olive oil that's left in here. So I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit, and I've got 1 cup of rice. This is a long grain rice. And I'm going to put that in here, and we're going to toast this rice. Our rice is starting to show some good signs of toastiness, so I just put some garlic in there. And I want to toast my spices in that oil. I'm going to put some black pepper, salt, cumin, and coriander. Now this recipe is really good if you have whole spices and you toast the whole spices, but I am just going to toast ground because that's what I have. And then I need one more ingredient to put in here to add some kind of warmth to it. And that's a little bit of cinnamon. If you had a cinnamon stick, you could put that in here as well. I do have it, but this was easier to grab, so that's what I grabbed. And now that that's nice and toasty, I'm gonna add our lentils, which I strained and ran under cold water after I boiled them or simmered them for 20 minutes. I'm gonna turn the stove off. Now this is where we are going to leave it. I've never done this before, but I just turned the stove off. I'm gonna let it kind of cool down a little bit because the rice is still pretty warm. I have a bay leaf, I'm gonna plop that in there. And then on the night I'm gonna cook this for dinner, which I will show you. I will heat this up and I will put the liquid in here and we'll actually cook the rice and the lentils. So what takes a long time with this recipe is the part we just did. Simmering the lentils, caramelizing the onions, toasting the rice. Actually cooking this, you know, it does take 20 minutes, but all I have to do is bring it up to a simmer, put the lid on and let it gently simmer for 20 to 30 minutes and it's done. So that is the hard work for this dinner. We still need to make the protein for this dinner. And I just realized I don't have a veggie side for the night. I have this, which is fine. Maybe we'll make something today. Maybe I will make something the day that I make this. But for now, I do have a recipe for the protein we're gonna make. I just pulled our chicken out of the fridge that we prepped earlier. And we're gonna get this marinade made up. So the first thing I'm gonna do is add a little bit of oil. We're gonna use a lot of the same flavors that we used in the lentils and rice. This is some yogurt, garlic, lemon juice, cinnamon, black pepper, coriander, cumin, ginger, salt, oregano, and smoked paprika. So I'm gonna mix our marinade all together. And then over here, I have a dish that I'm gonna let this sit in the fridge and marinate. And I've got some skewers because we're gonna put these on skewers for the grill. I just decided to add some onion powder because why not? So I want to get this marinade out of this bowl and onto this chicken. So I'm just going to coat the chicken and then I'll cover this and pop this into the fridge. And there is our protein to go along with our rice and lentils. So here is the first meal that's basically prepped. So we've got our rice and lentils. Once this is completely cool, I'll put this in the fridge. Our protein I'm going to put in the fridge, and our caramelized onions that we are going to top our rice and lentils when they are done cooking. I have not fully decided on the day that we have the sheet pan fajitas if I'm gonna turn those into burrito bowls and make just a pot of rice, or you can see these got some nice char color to them, or if we're gonna have them with tortillas in like little tacos, or fajitas I should say. This is very hot. I don't know if I mentioned, but I did take out the dessert out of the oven. So it's just resting. And then one thing I'm noticing with the brioche bread is because it's so enriched, it has so many eggs and so many additives like the eggs and butter, and there's a lot of fat in it. It's taking a long time to rise, and I think that's normal. So let me wash up. I need to wash my herbs, my jalapenos. I'm gonna grab some sour cream. Let me get this washed and we're gonna make our dipping sauce and finish our salsa. I also have a red onion that's been floating around here. I'm gonna start with one jalapeno, seeds and all, in the blender. If I can make it into the blender. One whole bunch of cilantro, because we love cilantro around here. If you do not like cilantro, go ahead and just add a little bit of parsley instead and green onions. Maybe like a whole bunch of green onions and one half bunch of parsley. And then I've got another bunch here that I'm gonna finely chop, and I'm gonna get this into our corn salsa. I think I'm not gonna use all of this for the corn salsa. I'm gonna top our rice and lentils with probably about half of this. So I'm gonna get a little container and put half of that in that so we can have a good amount of fresh herbs on our rice and lentils. And then I'm gonna dice up my jalapeno. I think I'm only gonna put one because these look like they're hot jalapenos, and I'm gonna dice up my onion and we'll get that into our salsa next. I already have my jalapeno in there. So we're gonna get our diced up red onion. I'm gonna add a good amount of salt, fresh lemon juice, and that's it for our corn salsa. So I'm gonna mix that together. It's still kind of warm, and then I'll pop this in the fridge once it cools down just a little bit more. So I'm not putting it into the fridge warm, but this is gonna be so yummy. Now we're gonna finish our sauce. I'm gonna add sour cream. And I'm also gonna add, to lighten it up just a little bit, you could use all sour cream or you could use all full fat Greek yogurt. I'm gonna do about a half and half ratio. And this sauce would also be really good on our rice and lentils. So I'm gonna make a good amount of it so we have a good amount prepped for the week. I'm gonna add some salt. Onion powder. Fresh lemon juice, not too much of that. And cumin. And I'm gonna zip this up, we're gonna taste it and see if we need to adjust the seasonings at all. This, my friend, would make a really good marinade too. Just throw this on some chicken or some beef. That is good. That is really good. It took a second for me to get the jalapeno flavor. Really good cilantro flavor, but I do think it's missing a little bit of acid. So I'm gonna add a little bit more lemon juice, a little bit more salt, and let me look at my spices. I think I'm gonna add just a little bit of cumin. See if I can do this without spilling it. I'm running out of spoons. That's probably good. And this is why I'm running out of spoons, because I keep tasting everything. Oh. That bite had some heat to it. Jalapenos are so funny. Sometimes they are mild as a bell pepper, and sometimes they'll kick your head off. So this is perfect. Yum. But I think I forgot to tell you what I was saying. Sometimes when I make sauces like this, if I make too much and we can't go through it, I'll throw the sauce in with some chicken, marinate it, put it on the grill, or marinate it and throw it in the freezer for another day. And it's a great way to use up something like this. If you go through the effort of making something like this, you don't want to waste the ingredients. So that's what I do a lot of times, is these end up being sauces, and then I end up marinating chicken or whatever it might be with it. I figured it out. So I didn't want to buy a bunch of produce to do this because I knew that I had some that needed to be used up. So what I figured out, I should say, is what vegetable I'm going to serve when I make the rice and chicken on the grill. I am going to make a coleslaw to go on top of our burgers. Normally when I make coleslaw, I would add mayonnaise, apple cider vinegar, some sugar, salt, and pepper, and that's it. Well, I'm only going to add mayonnaise and vinegar, salt, and pepper, no sugar, because the brioche buns have quite a bit of sweetness. We added sweetness to the meat, and so I think we don't need any sweetness from the coleslaw. We just need it from the bun that we already have. And then I think everything is now officially prepped, other than we have to cook our brioche. I'm going to put an egg wash on those when they're ready to go into the oven. I'm gonna clean the kitchen. I've done a fairly good job tidying as I go, but there's definitely some things here that need to be put away. So let me clean this up and then I will show you all of what we got done as we pull this together. I did want to show you though real quick, here are the bars. The rhubarb part was bubbly and these need to cool absolutely completely before you can cut into them so they have a nice bar shape. Our brioche bread is ready to go into the oven, but before I pop this in the oven, I'm going to go ahead and get an egg wash on it. Friend, if you have wanted to try making brioche, I highly recommend this recipe. It was delicious. Just note that it does take more flour, at least it did for me, than the recipe called for. And that could be because my chicken eggs are so large, they incorporated more moisture into the dough, so it required more flour, but these made delicious, delicious buns. And also I did end up making just some traditional French toast out of the loaf one morning, and it was so delicious. So what I do for the buns is I do put an egg wash on the buns, but I wanted just a classic look to a bun, so I did go ahead and top them with some sesame seeds. Not much flavor, just for kind of the look that we're going for when it comes to these buns. So I'm going to get this in the oven. I did cook both of them at the same time and I rotated them halfway through so that they cooked evenly, and the buns did not take as long to cook as the loaf. The loaf was so large, it took a good 45 minutes for the loaf to cook, and the buns only took about 25 minutes. So that is the bread ready. So later this evening, what I end up doing is I am able to finish up the dinner that we're going to have on the day that I did all of this prep. I took the meat out of the crock pot once it was super fall apart fork tender, and I took the liquid and poured it into my fat separator. You can see I did not add any extra liquid to my crock pot, and the meat released quite a bit of its own broth, so I didn't end up adding any chicken broth or water. It produced enough itself, but I wanted to remove any of the excess fat and the bone from the meat. So I let the meat cool a little bit. I pulled the meat and I shredded it, and I strained off the broth. I put that back in the crock pot with the shredded meat, and now we can go ahead and make our sandwiches. These are so good. I highly recommend this recipe, and I will link this recipe down below. And the way that the recipe recommends to do this is to toast the buns. So I'm going to take these brioche buns that we made and I'm going to put them on a cookie sheet, and then I am going to go ahead and top them with a little bit of provolone cheese. Put this in the oven and we are going to cook these on high on the broiler until they're nice and toasty. This recipe also recommended serving this with pickled onions and pickled jalapenos. Well, I happen to have both pickled onions and pickled jalapenos, so I took the recommendation from the recipe and I topped our sandwiches with both the pickled onions and jalapenos, and then I topped all of that with the coleslaw we made, and this was a delicious dinner. Definitely would recommend it, and it was super easy because the meat cooked basically on its own all day long while I was able to prep the other dinners. And then here are what the cream cheese rhubarb bars look like coming out of the refrigerator, because I let them chill and then I cut them. Those were a huge hit with my in-laws. So now I'm going to go ahead and prep the second dinner that we prepped. And the first thing I'm going to do is get the rice and lentils going. So I pulled those out of the refrigerator and I put it on the stove with my water, and I'm going to have that come up to a simmer. Now I'm going to prep the coleslaw. So this is the cabbage and carrots that we sliced up, and I'm going to take some of our extra jalapeno dressing. I'm going to put that on top. I originally made that dressing for topping our fajitas, but I thought that would make a delicious salad dressing or coleslaw dressing to go along with our rice and lentils and with our chicken kebabs. So I did go ahead and get the grill preheating. So now that our coleslaw is basically done with hardly any effort on my part, I can turn the heat down on the rice and lentils, and then I'm going to get the chicken skewers onto the grill. I think it would be fun to try making these skewers in the air fryer. I have been having so much fun playing around with my air fryer. They were really, really good on the grill. They did stick a little bit. I did have to kind of coax them off the grill grates. I think this might be the first time I'm ever grilling chicken using a yogurt marinade, and I don't know if that's what made it stick, because usually I don't have this problem, but they still tasted delicious even though they stuck a little bit to the grill grates. While our chicken is cooking on the other side, our rice and lentils are done, and I'm going to go ahead and add all of our caramelized onions in on top of the rice and lentils, and this recipe is basically finished once I top the whole thing with the cilantro that I washed and diced up earlier. And this is, friend, like I said, one of my favorite side dishes. I even enjoy it cold. You don't need to reheat it if you want to eat it for lunch, meal prep, or something like that the following days after you make it. It is so good. It's just humble ingredients, good spices, and cooked to perfection. I love it. Rice, lentils, it's really the caramelized onions that makes this just over the top delicious. So that's what that dinner looks like coming together. Now we're going to go ahead and pull together our fajitas. This comes together in a matter of minutes. It would have come together a little bit quicker if I didn't need to shred cheese, but I didn't have any shredded cheese. And so I went ahead and shredded up 2 little blocks of cheese so that I would have that prepped in my fridge. And everything else is basically done, other than I did warm up some tortillas because we ended up having these chicken fajitas with tortillas. And so you'll see all the different little accompaniments I put with this dinner, and it was so delicious. So if you want to see how I prepped 4 dinners in one day, we do a crock pot, Instant Pot, sheet pan, and grill dinner. I'll put that video here so you can see how on another day I took just about an hour and I prepped a week's worth of dinners. So these are all the condiments we have that we can make our fajitas just customizable to how we want. So friend, thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. I greatly appreciate every single one of you. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.